Hey everyone. Tonight, we're going to march you straight into the chaos of a medieval battlefield. Picture it. You're knee-deep in mud, your armor's pinching in places you didn't know could hurt, and the air smells like sweat, onions, and regret. This isn't Hollywood's polished version with heroic charges and clean swords. It's gritty, loud, and a little bit disgusting. You probably won't survive this in one piece, but you'll definitely learn something. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing where you're all tuning in from. Now, turn down the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soft background music, and let's get started tonight. You wake to a sound that's half horn, half the scream of a man who's just realized his life choices have led him here. The damp earth clings to your cheek, cold and unforgiving, as if the ground itself is trying to claim you before the battle even starts. Your armor, a mismatched set of chainmail and leather that smells like it's been through 3 wars and a barnyard, digs into your ribs. You try to stretch, but the metal links pinch like an angry crab, and you instantly regret it. Around you, the camp is stirring, a miserable orchestra of groans, clanks, and the occasional curse in a language you don't quite catch. A soldier nearby is still asleep, his head resting in a helmet filled with rainwater, snoring like he's dreaming of a better century. Another is wrestling a slug out of his boot with a dagger, muttering something about nature's revenge. You sit up, your spine protesting like an old gate, and survey the scene. The air is thick with the stench of wet wool, unwashed bodies, and something that might be last night's stew, or worse. Breakfast is handed out by a cook, who looks like he's personally offended by the concept of flavor. It's a crust of bread so hard it could double as a shield, probably baked during the last crusade. You chew slowly, not out of choice, but because your jaw is still sore from yesterday's feast. A chunk of meat that might have been mutton, might have been regret, washed down with ale, warm enough to make you question your commitment to hydration. Medieval water? That's a gamble you're not taking. It's basically a soup of bacteria and bad decisions. You splash swamp water on your face, calling it hygiene, and strap on your gear. The chainmail feels like it's fused to your skin, and your helmet wobbles like it's plotting to abandon you mid-fight. The camp is a patchwork of misery, men limping from trench foot, others sharpening weapons with the enthusiasm of someone sharpening their own doom. One guy's trying to fix his boot with a stick, and you're pretty sure he's losing. Somewhere, a rooster crows, which is ironic because you haven't seen a chicken in weeks, just a lot of things that taste like they used to be one. The orders come, barked by a sergeant on a horse who's clearly never walked a mile in his life. "Form up! Move out!" he shouts, his voice cutting through the fog like a dull blade. You glance at the man next to you, his face a mix of exhaustion and existential dread. "At least it's not raining," he mutters, just as a droplet hits your nose. Great. The army stirs, armor clanking, men grumbling, and someone steps on a pointy rock, yelping like a kicked dog. You haven't even seen the enemy yet, and you're already tired, hungry, and vaguely wishing you'd taken up pottery instead of soldiering. This is a good morning, by the way. The bad ones involve dysentery. The march begins, not with a triumphant stride, but with a collective shuffle, like a herd of reluctant sheep in iron sweaters. The ground is less earth and more a sentient puddle, sucking at your boots with every step. You adjust a strap, and the man behind you glares like you've personally betrayed the king. "Keep moving," he growls, his breath smelling like he's been gargling onions. Your armor chafes in places you didn't know could chafe, turning your thighs into a battlefield of their own. You're a walking iron sausage, slow roasting in your own sweat, and you're pretty sure your left boot is plotting a mutiny. The air is a delightful blend of livestock, cheap ale, and fear. Someone ahead lets out a fart, so aggressive it could be weaponized, and you try breathing through your mouth. Big mistake. You pass a dead hedgehog, a broken cart, and something that looks suspiciously like a toe. No one stops. Stopping means getting yelled at, and the sergeant's voice is a weapon of mass irritation. Faster, you lazy sods, he bellows, as if you're choosing to sink ankle deep in mud. You mutter a prayer, not for victory, but for a dry sock. Morale is a distant memory. Some men sing war songs, their voices cracking like they're auditioning for a funeral. Others mutter prayers, and one guy just screams into the wind, which honestly feels like the most relatable response. You catch yourself thinking, maybe the enemy will surrender before we get there. Then you remember they're probably thinking the same thing, which means someone's about to panic, and you're still not sure which end of your spear is the pointy one. Here's your canonical event. In 1066, the Battle of Hastings saw William the Conqueror's army march in similar misery before clashing with Harold Godwinson's forces. Mud, exhaustion, and questionable rations were just as much the enemy as the opposing army. One odd detail: soldiers often carried charms, like a rabbit's foot or a saint's relic, believing they'd ward off death's spoiler. They didn't. Historians still debate whether the Norman victory was due to superior tactics or Harold's army being worn out from marching 200 miles to fight another battle just weeks earlier. You trudge on, wondering if your epitaph will read, "Died for a crust of bread." At least the flies seem to like you. They're already planning a family reunion on your neck. You trudge forward, each step a squelching reminder that the ground is more enemy than ally. The mud clings to your boots like a jealous lover, thick and greedy, threatening to yank your left foot into another dimension. Your armor, a patchwork of iron and regret, clanks with every move, pinching your shoulders and rubbing your thighs raw. You're not a soldier, you're a walking complaint, slow roasted in sweat and misery. The air reeks of livestock, damp wool, and the kind of body odor that could knock a vulture out of the sky. Someone ahead lets rip a fart so potent it's practically a battle cry, and you gag, instantly regretting your decision to breathe at all. "Why didn't I become a scribe?" you mutter, but the wind swallows your words, along with your dignity. The man behind you is muttering too, something about his wife, his cow, or maybe both. It's hard to tell through his accent and the fact that he's missing half his teeth. You glance back, and his eyes are wild, like he's already fighting the battle in his head and losing. To your left, a soldier trips over a root and face plants into the mud, his helmet rolling off like it's trying to escape. Nobody helps. Helping means stopping, and stopping means the sergeant's boot up your backside. "Keep moving, you sorry lot," he bellows from his horse, looking smugly dry, while you're one puddle away from becoming a swamp creature. The march feels endless, a parade of misery stretching across a landscape that hates you. The ground shifts from mud to rocks, each one sharp enough to make you question your life choices. Your boots, borrowed and barely holding together, slip on a slick stone, and you flail, catching yourself just before you eat dirt. The guy next to you snickers your first joke of the day, courtesy of gravity. "Nice dance, twinkle toes," he says, before coughing up something that sounds like it has a heartbeat. You shoot him a glare, but it's weak. You're too tired to care. You pass a broken cart, its wheel cracked like your hopes, and a dead bird that's somehow less pathetic than you feel. The air grows heavier, thick with the promise of rain, and you wonder if drowning might be a nice change of pace. Someone starts singing a war song, but it's so off-key, it sounds like a cat being knighted. Another guy prays loudly, probably hoping God's taking notes. You'd pray too, but you're too busy trying not to step in whatever that brown smear is. It's either mud or something that used to love turnips. Here's your canonical event. In 1346, during the Battle of Crécy, English troops marched through similar conditions: rain-soaked, muddy terrain that bogged down their heavy armor before facing the French. The slog weakened both sides, but the English longbowmen turned the tide. An odd detail? Some soldiers smeared their faces with mud as makeshift camouflage, hoping to blend into the chaos, though it probably just made them itchier. Historians still debate whether the French knights' overconfidence or the muddy terrain was the bigger factor in their crushing defeat. Your shoulders burn, your legs ache, and your chainmail feels like it's plotting to strangle you. You adjust a strap, and it snaps, because of course it does. The man behind you growls, "Move, or I'll use you as a shield." You consider telling him your shield's already named Gerald, but you don't want to explain your emotional attachment to a warped piece of wood. Instead, you shuffle faster, your boots making a sad slurp with every step. The army's a mess. Half the men are limping. One guy's helmet is on backward, and someone's muttering about desertion. You don't blame him, but you've seen what happens to deserters, and you'd rather keep your head attached. A hill looms ahead, because of course it does. Medieval battles always seem to happen at the top of some godforsaken slope. You start the climb, your thighs screaming in protest. Someone slips and rolls down, cursing all the way, and you hear a faint cheer from the back. Second joke of the day. At least he's got a head start on retreat. Someone shouts, and you snort despite yourself. The humor's grim, but it's all you've got. The hill's a beast, steep and slick, and every step feels like a personal insult. You're not sure what's worse, the mud, the weight of your gear, or the growing realization that you're marching toward people who want to stab you. The sergeant's still yelling, his horse prancing like it's auditioning for a tapestry. You hate that horse. You hate the sergeant. You hate the hill, but you keep going because the alternative is worse. The enemy's out there, somewhere beyond the rise, and you're pretty sure they're just as miserable. That's your only comfort, that, and the thought of maybe stealing a dry pair of socks from a corpse later. Hey, a guy can dream. Finally, the hill crests, and you see the battlefield, or what will be one soon. It's just a field, really, dotted with rocks and patches of grass that look like they've given up. But there's a tension in the air, a hum that says, this is where things get ugly. You grip your weapon, a sword that's heavier than it looks, and try to remember which end does the stabbing. The man next to you is shaking, his spear wobbling like it's got stage fright. First battle, you ask? He nods, looking like he's about to cry. You don't tell him it's your first too. No point scaring him more, or yourself. The march has left you damp, hungry, and ready to negotiate with fate. You glance at the sky, hoping for a miracle, like maybe the enemy overslept. No such luck. The sergeant's voice cuts through again. Form up at dawn. Fantastic. Another beautiful morning awaits, and you're already counting the ways it could go wrong. You stagger into the battle camp, your boots caked in mud so thick you're practically waddling. The place is less a military stronghold and more a fever dream of filth and despair. Tents flap in the wind for the nobles, their canvas glowing faintly in the dusk like they're mocking you. For you, your bed is a patch of ground that's only slightly less cursed than the rest. You collapse onto it, claiming your spot with the grace of a sack of turnips hitting the dirt. The guy next to you does the same, muttering, "This is home now," and you nod, because what else is there to say? Welcome to the trench community, population, miserable. The smell hits you like a warhammer, a rancid cocktail of wet wool, unwashed bodies, and boots that have been through too many latrine trips. Somewhere nearby, a food cart is rotting. Or maybe it's the food itself. It's hard to tell. Flies buzz with the enthusiasm of wedding guests, some so bold you're tempted to name them. "Evening, Harold." You mutter as one lands on your arm, and you swear it winks back. The latrine calling it that is generous is just a shallow hole dug with haste and regret. Privacy? None. The smell? Biblical. You avoid eye contact with the guy squatting next to you, both of you pretending this isn't the low point of your day. A cook hands you a bowl of stew, gray as a storm cloud and twice as depressing. "What's in it?" you ask. Because hope is a stubborn thing. He stares at you for 5 long seconds, then walks away, leaving you with a bowl of mystery and a spoon that's seen better days. You eat it anyway, because hunger doesn't care about dignity. It tastes like regret with a hint of gravel, and you're pretty sure the meat had a name 2 hours ago. You choke it down, trying not to think about the aftertaste or the fact that your stomach's already staging a revolt. Around you, the camp is alive with grim activity. Some men sharpen weapons, the scrape of steel on stone like a lullaby for the damned. Others play dice, betting bits of bread or promises they can't keep. A few pray loudly, less out of faith, and more to make sure God's got them on the list for extra protection. One guy's singing about bread, off-key and with alarming passion, while another tries to play a lute like it's a weapon. It's not music, it's a cry for help. You catch a whiff of lavender and spot a knight striding past, his armor so clean it's practically glowing. You hate him instantly, mostly because he smells like he's bathed this month. Here's your canonical event. In 1415, before the Battle of Agincourt, English and French armies camped in similar squalor, with dysentery and rain-making, the night before the fight, as deadly as the battle itself. An odd detail? Some soldiers slept with their weapons wrapped in cloth to keep them dry, treating their swords like prized pets. Historians still debate whether the English victory was due to their longbows or the French army's exhaustion from camping in a muddy, disease-ridden hellscape. You curl up in your damp cloak next to a guy who snores like he's wrestling a bear in his sleep. You try to rest, but your brain's too busy cataloging all the ways you could die tomorrow: sword, arrow, or maybe that goat you saw earlier, which looked ready to headbutt you into oblivion. The camp's sounds don't help. Hacking coughs, distant weeping, and someone arguing with a mule like it's a philosophical debate. You close your eyes, hoping for sleep, but a voice cuts through the dark. Form up at sunrise. Perfect. You're already exhausted, and the battle hasn't even started. You shift, trying to find a spot that's not actively soaking through your cloak. The ground's cold, the air's colder, and your optimism is long gone. You think about home, wherever that is, and wonder if anyone there knows you're out here, surrounded by flies and bad decisions. A guy nearby mutters, "If I die, I'm haunting the cook first." You snort your first joke of the night, and it feels like a tiny victory. Second joke? "At least the flies are loyal." You whisper, and the snoring guy grunts in his sleep like he agrees. The camp's a mess, but there's a strange camaraderie in it. You're all in this together, bound by mud, hunger, and the shared knowledge that tomorrow might be worse. You clutch your sword, less for protection, and more because it's the only thing that feels solid. The stars above are hidden by clouds, and you wonder if they're watching or if they've given up on you too. Sleep creeps in, grudgingly, but it's shallow, interrupted by the distant bleat of that damn goat. You're not ready for tomorrow, but you're here, and that's going to have to be enough. The first light of dawn creeps over the camp like a thief, cold and unwelcoming, dragging you from a sleep that was more like a brief surrender to exhaustion. Your body aches, as if the ground itself spent the night punching you, and your cloak is damp enough to qualify as a swamp. Around you, men groan, cough, and curse as they crawl from their muddy nests, their faces etched with the kind of dread that only comes from knowing today might be your last. You fumble with your gear, your fingers stiff from the cold, and realize your sword's half buried in the dirt. You yank it free, muttering an apology to its rusty edge, and try to ignore the fact that your boots are now one with the earth. A trumpet blares, sharp and obnoxious, like it's personally offended by your existence. The camp stumbles to life, soldiers shuffling into some semblance of order. You line up, your legs wobbling, your stomach growling louder than the sergeant's shouts. The man next to you is shaking so hard his helmet rattles, and you're not sure if it's fear or last night's stew staging a revolt. First battle? You ask again, because small talk feels like the only thing keeping you sane. He nods, his eyes wide as dinner plates. You don't admit it's your first to solidarity in silence, you figure. Then he appears, the noble commander, striding out like he's auditioning for a tapestry. His armor gleams, untouched by mud or misery, and his cape flutters like it's got a personal breeze. He's got the smug energy of someone who's never been punched in the face, and you instantly resent him for it. He climbs onto a crate, probably the only dry thing in camp, and clears his throat. The crowd braces, half expecting a lecture on honor, half expecting him to fall off. Men, he bellows, pausing for dramatic effect. Someone coughs, and it sounds wet, possibly alive. Today, we fight for glory, for our king, for our lands, for honor. The crowd murmurs, mostly from hunger pangs, not patriotism. You glance sideways. The guy with the rattling helmet is now visibly shaking, and his sword's pointed the wrong way. Look to your brothers. Look to your steel, the commander continues, his voice soaring like he's narrating his own legend. Your steel looks like it's considering retirement, and your brothers smell like they haven't bathed since the last dynasty. The enemy fears us, he declares, and you wonder if the enemy's got their own shiny commander, yelling the same nonsense in a different accent. If you die today, he says, thrusting his sword skyward, you die as heroes. You swallow the urge to ask if you can die later, maybe as a baker or a monk. The speech ends with a mighty shout, "Forward!" and nobody moves. A few guys blink. One sneezes, spraying something unholy. The commander glares, shouting again until someone shuffles forward, and the rest of you follow, dragged by the momentum of not wanting to be singled out. You're spiritually prepared to panic with a purpose now, which is about as inspired as you're going to get. Here's your canonical event. In 1453, before the fall of Constantinople, Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II delivered a fiery speech to his troops, promising glory and divine favor, much like your commander's theatrics. It rallied his men to breach the city's walls, changing history. An odd detail, some soldiers painted their faces with ash from campfires, believing it would make them look fiercer, though it mostly made them sneeze. Historians still debate whether Mehmed's speech was the decisive factor, or if Constantinople's defenders were simply overwhelmed by superior numbers and cannons. You shuffle into line, your boots slipping in the mud, your shield, good old Gerald, feeling heavier by the second. The guy next to you mutters, "If I die, I'm taking that horse with me." You snort your first joke of the morning, and it feels like a tiny rebellion against the chaos. Second joke, "Maybe the enemy's late," you whisper, and he grins, though his eyes say he's already writing his will. Third joke, "At least the commander's cape will die heroically," you add, nodding at the fluttering fabric. It's not much, but it keeps you from screaming. The line forms, a jagged mess of men clutching weapons they barely understand. The sergeant's barking orders, his face redder than the dawn. You grip your sword, trying to look like you know what you're doing, but your hands are sweaty, and your helmet's slipping again. The commander's still shouting about glory, but all you can think about is the stew sitting like a rock in your gut. The battlefield looms ahead, a field of grass and rocks that looks deceptively peaceful, like it's waiting to betray you. You take a deep breath, tasting mud and fear, and wonder if you'll ever see another sunrise, or if you even want to. You're herded into formation, a noble phrase that sounds like it should mean precision and discipline. But really, it's just a clump of sweaty, terrified men, vaguely facing the same direction. Your boots slip in the mud, and you bump into the guy next to you, who grumbles like you've stolen his last crust of bread. The line is a mess. Half the men are still wrestling with their helmets. One guy's holding a pitchfork like he wandered in from a farm, and someone's shield is upside down, which you only notice because he's using it to scratch his back. You clutch your sword, hoping you look more competent than you feel, but your hands are clammy, and the blade feels like it's judging you. The sergeant, a man whose voice could curdle ale, barks orders that sound like random numbers. Front line, shield wall. Second line, pikes forward. Nobody knows what he means, but you nod anyway, because nodding feels safer than asking questions. You shuffle into place, your shield, Gerald, your trusty wooden friend, banging against your knee. To your left, a kid barely old enough to shave is gripping a spear twice his height, accidentally poking the guy in front of him. "Sorry," he squeaks, but the victim just curses in what might be Latin or just really creative swearing. To your right, a man's humming a tune that's suspiciously close to a tavern ditty, except he's swapped the lyrics for something about death and glory. It's not comforting. Behind you, someone's breathing like they're practicing for the dramatic death scene, and you're pretty sure he's not even wounded, just ready. The cavalry's off to the side, their horses snorting and pawing the ground like they know something you don't. The knights look majestic, their armor gleaming like they've got a personal polisher, while you're stuck in chainmail that smells like it was buried with its last owner. "Why didn't I join the cavalry?" you mutter. Then remember the last guy who fell off a horse and became a permanent part of the landscape. The sergeant screams, "Tighten the line," which is easier said than done when every second man is stepping on someone else's foot. You slide forward, your boots squelching, and realize your shield's backward now. Fixing it feels like admitting defeat, so you leave it, hoping nobody notices. The guy with the pitchfork is still here, looking like he's regretting every decision that led him to this moment. "I was supposed to be a baker," he whispers, and you nod because you were supposed to be anything but this. Here's your canonical event. In 1314, at the Battle of Bannockburn, Robert the Bruce's Scottish army formed ragged but effective schiltrons, tight formations of spearmen, to repel English cavalry. It was a chaotic scramble, much like your own, but it worked. An odd detail, some Scots fought barefoot, believing it gave them better grip in the muddy terrain. though it probably just gave them frostbite. Historians still debate whether the victory was due to Bruce's tactical genius or the English being caught off guard by the swampy ground and those stubborn spear walls. The drumbeat starts, a slow, ominous thud that feels like your heartbeat's been outsourced. Men whisper prayers. One guy's sobbing quietly, and you pretend not to notice because you're too busy bargaining with fate. Just let me survive until lunch, you think, though lunch is probably just more of that gray stew. You raise your sword, trying to look brave, but it's heavy and your arm's already complaining. The line's still a mess, but it's starting to look vaguely believable, like nobody's actively walking the wrong way, which is progress. Someone shouts, "Hold steady," and you wonder who they're talking to, because your legs are shaking and your neighbor's spear is now dangerously close to your ear. "Watch it, mate," you snap, and he mumbles an apology, looking like he might cry. First joke of the day. "At least if we die, we won't have to eat the stew again," you say, and he snorts, which is the closest you've come to camaraderie all morning. Second joke. "Maybe the enemy's got better cooks," you add, and the guy behind you chuckles, though it sounds more like a cough. Third joke. "If I get stabbed, I'm blaming Gerald," you mutter, patting your shield, and the pitchfork guy grins, looking slightly less like he's about to bolt. The air's thick with tension, the kind that makes your skin crawl. You take a deep breath, tasting mud, sweat, and the faint tang of fear. The enemy's out there, somewhere beyond the rise, and you're not sure if you're ready or just too tired to care. The drumbeat picks up, your heart matches it, and you grip your sword tighter, hoping you remember which end does the hurting. This is it, ready or not. You're about to find out what you're made of. Probably mud, mostly. The drumbeat pounds in your ears, each thud like a countdown to chaos, and then the sky betrays you. A soft, distant whoosh grows into a collective hiss, like 1,000 angry snakes waking up at once. "Shields up!" someone screams, and you scramble to raise Gerald, your lopsided wooden savior, just as the air darkens, not with clouds, but with arrows, hundreds of them, falling with the enthusiasm of a storm that's been personally offended by your existence. You crouch, pressing yourself against Gerald, who suddenly feels like a flimsy tavern table. The first arrow hits with a thud, embedding itself in the shield, and you whisper, "Good boy, Gerald," like it's a pet that just took a hit for you. The man 2 rows ahead isn't so lucky. He drops, an arrow sprouting from his shoulder like a grim flower, his scream cut short as he hits the mud. Someone curses in what you hope is Latin, because the alternative is that he's summoning demons, and you've got enough problems. The arrows keep coming, a relentless rain of pointy death. One clatters off your helmet, making your ears ring, and another grazes your arm, leaving a sting that feels like a promise of worse to come. You glance at Gerald, now sporting 3 arrows like badges of honor, and decide you'll name his firstborn plank after you if you survive. Movies lied about this part. Arrows don't glide elegantly like choreographed dancers. They slam, crack, and stick into anything soft armor, flesh, or your dwindling hope. You shrink behind Gerald, who's starting to look like a pincushion, and wonder if you can make yourself small enough to disappear. To your left, a guy's yelling at the archers like they can hear him, calling their aim a disgrace to their mothers. It's bold, but useless. To your right, someone's praying so fast it sounds like he's inventing a new language. Behind you, a man shouts, "I'm hit!" But when you glance back, he's just clutching his helmet, probably trying to get out of the next charge. Here's your canonical event. In 1099, during the First Crusade's siege of Jerusalem, Crusader forces endured a similar arrow storm from the city's defenders, huddling behind shields as they advanced. It was a brutal prelude to their assault. An odd detail? Some soldiers tied straw to their shields, hoping it would soften the impact of arrows, though it mostly just caught fire. Historians still debate whether the Crusaders' success was due to their sheer persistence or the defenders' dwindling supplies after weeks of siege. The second volley comes, and you duck lower, your knees sinking into the mud. A guy nearby just lies down, playing dead, and you're tempted to join him. Solid strategy, honestly. The arrows slow, the sky clears, and you're still breathing, which feels like a minor miracle. Gerald's held up, though he's looking rough, splinters sticking out like he's got a bad haircut. You pat him, muttering, "We're in this together," and try to ignore the fact that your shield's now heavier than your self-esteem. The line's a mess, men crouching, cursing, or crying openly. The sergeant's shouting, "Hold steady," but his voice cracks, and you wonder if he's as scared as you are. First joke of the day. "If I die, Gerald gets my ale ration," you mutter, and the kid with the spear snorts, nearly dropping his weapon. Second joke. "Bet the archers are out of arrows by now," you say, just as another volley whistles overhead, and you both duck, sharing a grim laugh. Third joke. "At least the mud's softer than the stew," you whisper, and the praying guy pauses to nod, like you've cracked the code to survival. Your heart's hammering, your mouth's dry, and your sword feels like it's gained weight since this morning. The enemy's still out there, closer now, their own line forming like a mirror of your misery. You catch a glimpse of their banners, flapping like they're taunting you, and wonder if their commander's as annoyingly clean as yours. The drumbeat picks up again, faster now, urging you forward. You grip Gerald tighter, your knuckles white, and try to remember your training swing hard. Don't die. Simple enough, right? The arrows stop, but the silence is worse. It's the kind of quiet that screams trouble, like the world's holding its breath before spitting in your face. Someone shouts, "Advance," and your line lurches forward, a reluctant wave of mud-caked men. You're not ready, but you're moving, because standing still means becoming a target, or worse, getting yelled at. The enemy's waiting, and you're pretty sure they're not here to swap recipes. You take a shaky breath, raise your sword, and hope Gerald's got one more miracle in him. The drumbeat pounds in your ears, each thud like a countdown to chaos, and then the sky betrays you. A soft, distant whoosh grows into a collective hiss, like 1,000 angry snakes waking up at once. "Shields up!" someone screams, and you scramble to raise Gerald, your lopsided wooden savior, just as the air darkens. Not with clouds, but with arrows, hundreds of them, falling with the enthusiasm of a storm that's been personally offended by your existence. You crouch, pressing yourself against Gerald, who suddenly feels like a flimsy tavern table. The first arrow hits with a thud, embedding itself in the shield, and you whisper, "Good boy, Gerald," like it's a pet that just took a hit for you. The man 2 rows ahead isn't so lucky. He drops, an arrow sprouting from his shoulder like a grim flower, his scream cut short as he hits the mud. Someone curses in what you hope is Latin, because the alternative is that he's summoning demons, and you've got enough problems. The arrows keep coming, a relentless rain of pointy death. One clatters off your helmet, making your ears ring, and another grazes your arm, leaving a sting that feels like a promise of worse to come. You glance at Gerald, now sporting 3 arrows like badges of honor, and decide you'll name his firstborn plank after you if you survive. Movies lied about this part. Arrows don't glide elegantly like choreographed dancers. They slam, crack, and stick into anything soft armor, flesh, or your dwindling hope. You shrink behind Gerald, who's starting to look like a pincushion, and wonder if you can make yourself small enough to disappear. To your left, a guy's yelling at the archers like they can hear him, calling their aim a disgrace to their mothers. It's bold, but useless. To your right, someone's praying so fast it sounds like he's inventing a new language. Behind you, a man shouts, "I'm hit," but when you glance back, he's just clutching his helmet, probably trying to get out of the next charge. Here's your canonical event. In 1099, during the First Crusade's siege of Jerusalem, Crusader forces endured a similar arrow storm from the city's defenders, huddling behind shields as they advanced. It was a brutal prelude to their assault. An odd detail? Some soldiers tied straw to their shields, hoping it would soften the impact of arrows, though it mostly just caught fire. Historians still debate whether the Crusaders' success was due to their sheer persistence or the defenders' dwindling supplies after weeks of siege. The second volley comes, and you duck lower, your knees sinking into the mud. A guy nearby just lies down, playing dead, and you're tempted to join him. Solid strategy, honestly. The arrows slow, the sky clears, and you're still breathing, which feels like a minor miracle. Gerald's held up, though he's looking rough, splinters sticking out like he's got a bad haircut. You pat him, muttering, "We're in this together," and try to ignore the fact that your shield's now heavier than your self-esteem. The line's a mess, men crouching, cursing, or crying openly. The sergeant's shouting, "Hold steady," but his voice cracks, and you wonder if he's as scared as you are. First joke of the day, "If I die, Gerald gets my ale ration," you mutter. And the kid with the spear snorts, nearly dropping his weapon. Second joke, "Bet the archers are out of arrows by now," you say, just as another volley whistles overhead, and you both duck, sharing a grim laugh. Third joke, "At least the mud's softer than the stew," you whisper, and the praying guy pauses to nod, like you've cracked the code to survival. Your heart's hammering, your mouth's dry, and your sword feels like it's gained weight since this morning. The enemy's still out there, closer now, their own line forming like a mirror of your misery. You catch a glimpse of their banners, flapping like they're taunting you, and wonder if their commander's as annoyingly clean as yours. The drumbeat picks up again, faster now, urging you forward. You grip Gerald tighter, your knuckles white, and try to remember your training. Swing hard, don't die. Simple enough, right? The arrows stop, but the silence is worse. It's the kind of quiet that screams trouble, like the world's holding its breath before spitting in your face. Someone shouts, "Advance!" and your line lurches forward, a reluctant wave of mud-caked men. You're not ready, but you're moving, because standing still means becoming a target, or worse, getting yelled at. The enemy's waiting, and you're pretty sure they're not here to swap recipes. You take a shaky breath, raise your sword, and hope Gerald's got one more miracle in him. The arrows stop, and the silence is a lie, heavy and thick, like the moment before a tavern brawl explodes. Your heart's pounding so hard, you're sure the enemy can hear it, and Gerald, your battered shield, is trembling in your grip. Or maybe that's just you. The sergeant screams, "Forward!" and your line surges, not with courage, but with the reluctant momentum of men who know they'll be trampled if they hesitate. You slam into the enemy like a sack of potatoes, crashing into another sack of potatoes, except these ones are armed and smell worse. This isn't a dance, it's a meat grinder. You swing your sword, hoping it hits something that isn't you, and the world dissolves into sweat, steel, and screams. Forget the elegant swordplay of ballads. This is chaos, close, sweaty, and deeply personal. You're face to face with an enemy soldier, his breath reeking of onions and panic, his eyes as wide as yours. You swing, he swings, metal crashes, and someone's shield splinters with a crack that makes your teeth hurt. You stumble, your boots slipping in the mud, and narrowly dodge a mace that whistles past your ear. Not today, you mutter, though you're not sure who you're convincing. Your helmet fogs up, your arms burn, and you're pretty sure you just stabbed a clod of dirt. There's no room for strategy, just flailing, grunting, and hoping you don't trip over a corpse. Blood's on your gauntlet, and you don't know whose. Probably not yours, but you're too busy to check. A man swings at your head, you duck, and he hits someone else, who yelps like a kicked dog. You exchange a glance, half apology, half better you than me, and keep moving. Someone nearby's yelling, "For the king," like it's a magic spell, but it doesn't stop the axe that grazes his arm. You try to remember your training, but it was mostly swing hard, don't die, so you swing harder, hitting armor, mud, maybe a person. It's a blur, and you're just trying to stay upright. Here's your canonical event. In 1380, at the Battle of Chioggia, during the War of Chioggia, Venetian and Genoese forces clashed in brutal close combat, much like your frantic melee, with men fighting in cramped, chaotic conditions. The Venetians turned the tide by luring the enemy into a trap. An odd detail: some fighters use weighted nets to entangle opponents, turning the battlefield into a bizarre fishing expedition. Historians still debate whether the Venetian victory was due to superior tactics or the Genoese overextending their supply lines in the lagoon. You shove forward, your shoulder slamming into someone's ribs, friend or foe. It's hard to tell. The air's thick with the stench of sweat, blood, and what you're pretty sure is last night's turnip stew making a comeback. A guy next to you trips, goes down, and gets stepped on. You don't stop. You can't. Stopping means joining him, and you're not ready to be part of the mud yet. First joke: if we survive, I'm never eating stew again. You gasp, and the guy beside you grunts, maybe a laugh, maybe just pain. Second joke: bet their cook's worse than ours, you say, dodging a spear that nearly takes your ear off. Third joke: Gerald's the real hero here, you mutter as your shield takes another hit, splintering but holding. There's no space, no breath, just bodies pressing in, metal clanging, and the occasional scream that cuts off too fast. You swing again, hitting something solid, and hope it wasn't your own foot. Someone's shoulder slams into you, and you stumble sideways, gasping like a fish on land. The enemy's face is close now, his beard matted with mud, his eyes wild with the same fear you feel. You don't hate him. You're just both here, stuck in this nightmare, trying not to die. You swing again, miss, and hear a wet thud nearby. Someone's not getting up. You keep moving, because stopping means becoming part of the scenery, and you're not ready to decorate this field. The chaos doesn't let up. A sword grazes your arm, and you yelp, checking for blood. None, just a dent in your armor. You're alive, but your brain's screaming that this is a terrible idea. The line's dissolving, no longer a formation, but a mob of desperate men swinging anything sharp. You spot the pitchfork guy from earlier, still alive, jabbing wildly like he's harvesting nightmares. Good for you, Baker. You think and push forward, your sword heavier with every swing. The battle's just begun, and you're already wondering how anyone survives this, or if they're just too stubborn to quit. The battlefield is a screaming, clanging nightmare, a symphony of chaos that makes your ears beg for mercy. It's not the heroic clash of swords you'd hear in a bard's tale. No, it's more like a livestock market smashing into a blacksmith's shop during a thunderstorm. Men yell, not just from wounds, but to psych themselves up, to drown out fear, or because someone stepped on their foot in the melee. The kid with the spear from earlier is shrieking like he's auditioning for a banshee, swinging wildly at anything that moves, including a bush that's probably more scared than he is. You're still clutching Gerald, your shield, now a splintered mess, but still your best friend, as you dodge a mace that comes too close to rearranging your face. The sounds are relentless. Swords clang against shields with a metallic screech that makes your teeth ache. Maces land with a dull, sickening thump on armor, or worse, on something softer. Arrows whistle past, each one a tiny promise of regret, and when a spear punches through chain mail, the resulting shriek crawls up your spine and sets up camp. But the worst isn't the screams or the steel. It's the wet sounds, the squelch of boots in blood-soaked mud, the slurp of a body hitting the ground, the squish of something you don't want to identify underfoot. These aren't sounds you forget. They're the kind that move into your nightmares and refuse to pay rent. Somewhere behind you, a man's shouting, "Hold the line," like he's yelling at the tide to stop. Nobody listens. You're too busy ducking a sword that's more rust than blade. A horse screams nearby, a haunting wail that makes you wish you'd stayed in camp with the flies. Someone's singing a hymn, off-key and desperate, like they're hoping God's a forgiving music critic. Your ears ring, not from injury but from overload, and you swing your sword on instinct, hitting something armor, hopefully. You're not aiming anymore. You're just surviving. Here's your canonical event. In 1214, at the Battle of Bouvines, French and Holy Roman Empire forces clashed in a cacophony of steel and screams, with the French knight's charge turning the tide. The noise was so overwhelming that chroniclers noted it could be heard miles away. An odd detail, some soldiers tied bells to their armor, thinking the jingle would intimidate enemies, though it mostly just annoyed their own side. Historians still debate whether the French victory was due to King Philip II's leadership or the empire's knights getting bogged down in the muddy terrain. You stumble over a broken shield, nearly falling, and catch a glimpse of the pitchfork guy, still jabbing like he's fighting for a loaf of bread. "Keep baking, mate," you mutter, and he flashes a grin, which is either bravery or delirium. First joke. "If we live, I'm writing a song about Gerald," you gasp, and the guy next to you snorts, nearly dropping his axe. Second joke. "Bet their singers are worse than ours," you say, as the off-key hymn guy hits a note that could curdle milk. Third joke. "At least the mud's got rhythm," you whisper, sidestepping a puddle that's suspiciously red. Your helmet's fogged up again, and you can barely see through the sweat and grime. A man cries out for his mother, another curses a horse, and you're pretty sure someone just apologized to a tree. Your sword's heavy, your arms are screaming, and every swing feels like it's borrowing energy from tomorrow. The enemy's still coming, their faces blurred by mud and fear, and you realize you don't hate them, you're just both stuck in this loud, messy hell. A mace grazes your shoulder, and you yelp, checking for blood none, but your armor's dented, and your pride's taken a worse hit. The noise doesn't let up, a relentless assault on your senses. You dodge a spear, trip over a helmet, and swing at a shadow that might be an enemy or just bad luck. The line's gone, replaced by a mob of flailing men, some fighting, some running, some just screaming for the sake of it. You keep moving, because stopping means becoming part of the soundscape, and you're not ready to be a wet squelch yet. Gerald takes another hit, splintering but holding, and you whisper a promise to carve him a medal if you both make it out. The battle's a blur, and all you can do is swing, duck, and pray the noise doesn't swallow you whole. The battlefield is a churned-up mess of mud, blood, and broken dreams, and you're still swinging your sword, though you're not sure if you're fighting or just trying to stay upright. Death is everywhere, and it's not the noble, slow-motion collapse you'd expect from a minstrel's tale. It's messy, sudden, and often absurdly random. 1 minute you're dodging a spear, the next you hear a thud behind you, and a man's down, an arrow through his neck from who knows where. He doesn't scream, he just drops, face first into the mud, like he's decided to take a nap at the worst possible time. You don't stop to check he's gone, and you're too busy trying not to join him. You glance around, and the ground is littered with bodies, some still, some twitching. A guy nearby takes a mace to the chest and falls with a gurgle that makes your stomach lurch. Another trips over a rock, snaps his ankle, and gets trampled by his own side before he can even scream. Friendly fire is a real problem. Some poor sod swings a flail too wide, and you duck just as it clips the ear off the man next to you. He howls, clutching his head, and you mutter, "Sorry, Jeff," because it feels like someone should apologize, even if it wasn't your fault. Death here isn't heroic. It's a clumsy, undignified accident, like slipping on a banana peel made of blood and bad decisions. You step over a body, friend, foe, doesn't matter, and nearly trip on a sword that's been abandoned like a bad idea. A horse gallops past, riderless, its eyes wild with panic, and you wonder if it's smarter than you are. Some men don't even die from weapons. They just collapse, crushed under a pile of their own comrades, trying to flee in the same direction. You see a guy lying still, maybe playing dead, maybe not, you don't check. Survival means not looking too closely. Here's your canonical event. In 1471, at the Battle of Barnet during the Wars of the Roses, fog and chaos led to rampant friendly fire, with Lancastrian soldiers accidentally killing their own in the confusion. The battle was a slaughter, with men dying from missteps as much as enemy blades. An odd detail, some soldiers wore mismatched armor, looted from previous battles, making it impossible to tell friend from foe in the haze. Historians still debate whether the fog or the Lancastrians' poor coordination was the bigger factor in their defeat. You swing your sword again, hitting something armor, hopefully, and your arm screams in protest. The air's thick with the stench of sweat, blood, and what you're pretty sure is someone's lunch making a reappearance. First joke: "If I die, I'm haunting whoever made this mud," you mutter, and the guy with the pitchfork, still miraculously alive, snorts. Second joke: "Bet the enemy's tripping over their own egos," you say, dodging a spear that lands in the dirt with a sad thud. Third joke: "Gerald's got more scars than I do," you whisper, patting your shield, which is now more splinters than wood, but still hanging on. A man screams nearby, not from a wound, but because he's just realized he's on the wrong side. He bolts, waving his arms like a surrender flag, and you almost envy him until an arrow catches him in the back. You keep moving, your boots sinking deeper with every step, the mud grabbing like it's got personal grudges. Your helmet slipped again, half blinding you, and you're fighting as much to see as to survive. Someone yells, "For the king!" but it's drowned out by a wet crunch that you try not to think about. You're not sure who's winning, Nobody's winning, really just surviving, and even that's starting to feel like a stretch. You duck a wild swing, your knees buckling, and realize you're one bad step from becoming another body in the mud. The guy next to you, the one who was humming earlier, is gone, whether dead or just lost in the chaos. You don't know. You don't have time to care. You swing again, hitting something soft, and hope it wasn't your own foot. The battle's a blur of steel, screams, and the occasional horse running the wrong way. You're alive, somehow, but every second feels like borrowing time from a very impatient lender. Gerald's still with you, barely, and you whisper a promise to retire him to a nice fireplace if you both make it out. The ground shakes beneath you, a low rumble that makes your ribs vibrate, and your stomach consider immediate evacuation. You glance up, and there they are, war horses charging like thunder given hooves, their riders gleaming in armor that costs more than your entire village. The cavalry's here, and it's both majestic and terrifying, like a storm that doesn't care who it flattens. The knights sit tall, their banners flapping like they're auditioning for a heroic painting, but up close, it's just chaos, screaming horses, screaming men, and you screaming internally as you realize you're in their path. You dive to the side, clutching Gerald, your splintered shield, and pray you don't become a smear in the mud. Horses don't respect formations or personal space. One charges past, its hooves kicking up clods of dirt that hit you like wet insults. A knight swings his sword, missing his target and nearly taking your head off instead. You duck, muttering, "Thanks for the haircut," and scramble to your feet. Another horse rears, spooked by a flapping banner, and bolts toward the latrines, dragging its rider with it. You almost laugh, first joke of the day, but the sound dies in your throat as another horse barrels through, trampling a guy who didn't move fast enough. He vanishes beneath the hooves, and you wince, hoping he was already out of the fight. Knights aren't immune to the chaos either. One falls off, his armor crashing like a kitchen full of pots, and lies there flailing like a beetle on its back. "Get up, fancy pants," you mutter. But someone's already sticking him with a spear. The horses keep coming, their eyes wild, their breath steaming in the cold air. You learn the rule fast. Don't be under the horse. A guy tries to grab a knight's leg, misses, and gets kicked so hard you're pretty sure he's ringing like a bell now. Second joke, "Bet that horse is promoted before me," you whisper, and the pitchfork guy, still alive somehow, snorts, jabbing at nothing. Here's your canonical event. In 1415, at the Battle of Agincourt, the French cavalry charged into a muddy field, only to be bogged down and slaughtered by English archers and infantry. The horses, weighed down by armor and terrain, became liabilities. An odd detail? Some knights painted their horses' armor with bright colors, thinking it would inspire fear, though it mostly just made them bigger targets. Historians still debate whether the French cavalry's failure was due to the mud or their commander's overconfidence in a frontal assault. You dodge another horse, its rider shouting something about glory that gets cut off when he slams into a low branch. Third joke, "Gerald's braver than that night," you mutter, patting your shield, which takes a stray hoof and holds barely. The cavalry's charge scatters your line, turning your shaky formation into a mob of men, running, fighting, or just trying not to get stepped on. A horse screams, a sound that crawls into your bones, and you see one collapse, its legs tangled in a broken shield. Its rider scrambles up, only to be swarmed by infantry who don't care about his fancy armor. The air's thick with dust, blood, and the stench of panicked animals. You swing your sword, more to keep people away than to hit anything, and nearly trip over a helmet that's rolling like it's got somewhere better to be. The pitchfork guy's still at it, jabbing like he's avenging every bad loaf he ever baked. You catch his eye, and he nods, a silent agreement that you're both too stubborn to die yet. The cavalry's momentum slows, bogged down by mud and bodies, but the damage is done. Your side's a mess, and the enemy's regrouping, their own horses circling like wolves. You're still standing, somehow, your arms aching, your breath ragged. Gerald's a wreck, splintered and dented, but he's still got your back. You take a shaky step, trying to find the line that no longer exists, and realize the battle's shifted less. A fight now, more, a desperate scramble to stay alive. A knight gallops past, his horse limping, and you wonder if they're as tired as you are. Probably not, they've got horses. You grip your sword, dodge a stray hoof, and keep moving, because stopping means becoming part of the scenery, and you're not ready to be a muddy footnote in someone else's victory. You're still reeling from the cavalry's charge, your ears ringing with the thunder of hooves and the screams of men who didn't dodge fast enough. The mud's a traitor, slick and greedy, and it finally wins. You slip, your boots betraying you, and down you go, landing hard on your side. Gerald, your battered shield, slams into the ground beside you, and for a moment, you're just another lump in the churned-up battlefield. The world's a blur of steel, mud, and flailing limbs, and you've got about 3 seconds to decide. Get up and maybe die, or stay down and maybe die. Neither option's great, but lying here feels like tempting fate to step on you literally. You try to stand, but a stray elbow from someone, friend, foe, doesn't matter, knocks you back down. A horse gallops past, close enough that you feel the wind of its hooves, and you decide playing dead might not be the worst idea. You lie still, face half buried in the mud, breathing shallow like you're auditioning for a grave. The sounds swirl around you, steel clashing, men shouting, and that horrible wet splat of something ending badly nearby. You peek through slitted eyes and see a body drop next to you, his face frozen in surprise, an arrow sticking out of his chest. You don't look too long staring, invites bad luck. The chaos moves past, a wave of violence rolling elsewhere, and you're still breathing, which is more than you expected. Getting up is tempting, but every time you shift, another pair of boots stomps by, and you're not keen on becoming battlefield flooring. You clutch Gerald, now more splinters than shield, and whisper, "We're not done yet, mate." The guy who fell next to you doesn't move, and you hope he's just committed to the dead man act. You're not checking survival selfish like that. Here's your canonical event. In 1346, at the Battle of Crécy, many French soldiers fell in the muddy chaos, some trampled by their own retreating comrades, others playing dead to avoid further slaughter. The English exploited the disarray to secure victory. An odd detail? Some soldiers smeared their faces with mud to blend into the ground, hoping to be overlooked, though it mostly just made their eyes sting. Historians still debate whether the French losses were due to poor leadership or the sheer exhaustion of fighting in a quagmire after a long march. You stay down, the mud cold against your cheek, smelling like blood and despair. First joke: "If I die, Gerald gets my spot by the fire," you mutter. And the pitchfork guy, somehow still nearby, lets out a choked laugh before ducking a swinging axe. Second joke: "Bet the enemy's slipping too. Nobody beats this mud," you whisper as another soldier slides past, cursing the ground like it's a personal enemy. Third joke: "At least I'm getting a mud bath," you say under your breath, and you swear Gerald creaks in agreement. The battle's noise fades slightly, like the fight's moving to another part of the field. You risk a glance, men are still clashing, but the worst of the melee's shifted. You could get up, rejoin the fray, and be a hero. Or you could stay here, impersonating a corpse, and maybe see tomorrow. It's not cowardice, it's strategy, you tell yourself. A looter passes, poking bodies with a stick, and you hold your breath, praying he doesn't get curious. He moves on, and you exhale, tasting dirt. The pitchfork guy's still out there, jabbing like he's got a personal grudge against the world, and you admire his stubbornness, even if it's probably going to get him killed. You shift, testing your legs, and realize you're covered in grime, blood, mud, and something you're not brave enough to identify. Getting up feels like a bad idea, but staying down's not much better. You hear the sergeant's voice, distant but sharp, yelling, "Regroup," and you know you can't play dead forever. You crawl to your knees, clutching Gerald, and look around. The field's a mess of bodies, broken weapons, and abandoned hopes. You're alive, but you're not sure if that's a victory or just a delay. You stand, wobbly, and grip your sword, ready to stumble back into the chaos, because what else can you do? The battle's roar fades to a dull hum, like a storm that's run out of spite. You're still standing, somehow, your legs wobbling like a newborn colt's, your sword heavier than your regrets. The field is a grim tapestry of mud, bodies, and broken gear, with the occasional boot sitting alone like it's waiting for its owner to come back. You blink through the sweat and blood, hopefully not yours, trying to make sense of the chaos. The screams have turned to groans, the clanging of steel to the shuffle of exhausted feet. Someone mumbles, "We won," with all the enthusiasm of a man who's just realized he gets to live in a tent full of fleas. Another guy, clutching an arm that's not quite attached, yells, "Victory!" You nod, because you're upright, breathing, and mostly unperforated, which is the medieval definition of winning. You look around, and the battlefield feels eerily quiet, like it's embarrassed by what it's become. Bodies lie scattered, some still, some twitching, their faces frozen in expressions of surprise or resignation. A broken spear sticks out of the mud like a sad flagpole, and a helmet rolls by, empty and dented. You spot the pitchfork guy, miraculously alive, leaning on his weapon like it's the only thing keeping him upright. "Still baking?" you call, and he grins, though it's more grimace than joy. The air smells of blood, sweat, and the faint tang of burned grass. Someone's horse must have kicked over a torch. There's no dramatic banner raised, no villainous general shouting, "Retreat," like in the songs. The fight just stops, petering out like a fire that's run out of fuel. You're not sure how it ended, only that the noise has shifted from aggressive to exhausted. You stumble across the field, Gerald, your battered shield, dragging in the mud. You pass a fallen friend, his eyes open but unseeing, and you look away, because staring feels like inviting ghosts. The enemy's scattered too, some fleeing, some lying in the dirt, looking no different from your own side. Death doesn't pick favorites, it seems. Here's your canonical event. In 1265, at the Battle of Evesham, Simon de Montfort's rebel forces were decimated by royalists in a brutal, chaotic clash. The battle ended with a sudden collapse of resistance, leaving a field of carnage and silence. An odd detail? Some soldiers tied colored cloth to their arms to identify their side. But in the rain and mud, it just turned into a soggy mess. Historians still debate whether de Montfort's defeat was due to tactical errors or the royalists' overwhelming numbers and better weather luck. You keep moving, your boots squelching, your body one big bruise. First joke, if this is victory, I'd hate to see defeat, you mutter, and the pitchfork guy chuckles, coughing up mud. Second joke. Bet the commander's already writing his victory speech, you say, nodding toward the noble, still clean, striding through the carnage like he's on a stroll. Third joke. Gerald deserves a knighthood more than me, you whisper, patting your shield, which is now more kindling than armor. Nobody laughs at that one, but you feel Gerald appreciates the sentiment. A priest shuffles through, muttering prayers over the fallen, his robes splattered with mud. A few men are looting, picking through bodies for swords, coins, or boots that aren't falling apart. You don't judge, you're eyeing a decent dagger yourself. Because survival doesn't care about dignity. Your commander's voice carries over the field, talking about honor and glory, but it's drowned out by the ringing in your ears and the ache in your bones. You think about the men who didn't make it, then about your foot, which might be broken, then about that gray stew, which you immediately regret thinking about. You find a rock and sit, exhaling like you've been holding your breath for hours. You're alive, filthy, traumatized, possibly concussed, but alive. In medieval terms, that's a resounding success. You whisper, "Never again," under your breath, knowing full well there's another skirmish next week. The pitchfork guy slumps nearby, still gripping his weapon like it's his only friend. "We made it," he says, and you nod, too tired to speak. The field's quiet now, but it's not peaceful, just empty, like it's waiting for the next round of madness. You grip your sword, wondering if you'll ever feel clean again, and try not to think about tomorrow. The battle's done, but the field's still a mess, like a tavern brawl spilled over 100 acres. You limp back toward camp, Gerald, your splintered shield, dragging in the mud like a tired dog. The air's heavy with the stench of blood, smoke, and something you're hoping is just spilled stew. Cleanup begins, and it's not the noble burial scene you'd expect from a bard's tale. It's grim, messy, and smells worse than the latrine. Men stumble around, some dragging bodies, others poking through the carnage for anything worth keeping. You spot a guy pulling boots off a corpse, muttering, "Sorry, mate, you don't need these anymore." You don't judge. Your own boots are more whole than leather. The medics, if you can call them that, arrive, looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. They're barbers with knives and bad attitudes. Their medical training limited to bite this stick and scream quietly. One's cleaning a wound with wine, which seems like a waste of a good drink until you see the wound. Your thigh's got a gash you didn't notice, and the barber takes one look before saying, "We'll see." He pulls out a needle that's been sterilized by waving it near a candle, and you grit your teeth, failing spectacularly at not yelling. The stitch job's sloppy, but you're alive, which is more than you can say for the guy next to you, who's got a javelin sticking out of his arm and seems oddly proud of it. "It's mine now," he mutters, like it's a trophy. Bodies are piled haphazardly, some covered, most not. You recognize a face pitchfork guy still clutching his weapon, his eyes blank. You look away, your stomach twisting. The flies are having a feast, buzzing like they've been invited to a royal banquet. One lands on your wound, and you swat it, realizing it's the cleanest thing you've touched all day. Men dig shallow graves. Others light pyres, the smoke curling up like it's trying to escape this place. You grab a dented helmet from the ground. "Sorry, Gregor, you're not using it," and keep moving, because standing still feels like asking for trouble. Here's your canonical event. In 732, after the Battle of Tours, Frankish forces under Charles Martel cleaned up a battlefield littered with Umayyad dead, looting weapons and armor while burying their own in hasty graves. It was grim work, but it solidified Frankish dominance. An odd detail? Some soldiers kept enemy swords as talismans, believing they held the strength of their former owners, though most just sold them for ale. Historians still debate whether the victory was due to Martel's tactical brilliance or the Umayyads' overextension after a long campaign. You bandage your thigh, the cloth already soaking through, and try not to think about infection or the flies, who seem to have named you their new king. First joke: if I die, I'm billing the barber, you mutter, and a nearby looter chuckles, pocketing a dagger. Second joke: bet the flies throw a better feast than our cook, you say, swatting another one off your arm. Third joke: Gerald's seen more action than the commander, you whisper, leaning on your shield, which creaks like it's ready to retire. The cleanup's a mix of triage and scavenging, with men shouting over who gets a decent pair of boots. You find a sword, slightly less rusty than yours, and tuck it under your arm, feeling briefly rich. A priest mumbles prayers, his voice drowned out by the groans of the wounded and the crackle of pyres. Someone sitting on a rock, staring blankly, a spear still lodged in his shoulder. You offer help. He waves you off, saying, "It's part of me now." You nod, because what else can you say? The battlefield's quieter now, but it's not peaceful, just exhausted, like it's given up on making sense. You stumble toward camp, your body screaming with every step. The wound on your thigh stings, your head's pounding, and you're pretty sure you smell worse than the latrine. But you're alive, which is more than you expected this morning. You glance back at the field, a mess of mud and memory, and wonder how anyone will turn this into a heroic tale. For now, all you want is a dry spot to collapse, and maybe a sip of ale that doesn't taste like regret. Tomorrow's another day, and you're already dreading it. You limp back to camp, each step a reminder that your body's more bruised than man now. Gerald, your shield, is a splintered wreck, dragging in the mud like it's as done with this day as you are. The camp's a familiar mess, but it smells worse somehow, like sweat, blood, and that cursed stew have formed an unholy alliance. You find a patch of ground that's marginally less swampy in collapse, your armor clanking like a bag of broken dreams. Around you, men groan, some from wounds, others from the sheer weight of surviving. One guy's singing, off-key as ever, like he's trying to convince himself he's still alive. Another's praying to at least 3 gods, hedging his bets. You're too sore to care. The air's thick with the stench of cooked horse. Someone's desperate enough to roast one, and the faint tang of ale that's more regret than refreshment. You approach the cook, who hands you a bowl of something that's legally not soup, but emotionally close enough. It's gray, lumpy, and smells like it's been through a war of its own. "What's in it?" you ask, already knowing better. He glares, and you eat it anyway, because hunger's a cruel master. It tastes like disappointment with a hint of dirt, but you choke it down, wondering if the flies would approve. They're circling, as loyal as ever, and you swat one away, muttering, "Not tonight, Harold." Men are scattered around, some cleaning weapons, others just staring into the distance like they've seen the end of the world. The guy next to you is wiping his sword on his shirt while still wearing it, because dignity left camp hours ago. You try to sleep, but the ground's wet, your thighs throbbing from that barber's surgery, and the snoring guy nearby sounds like a church organ falling down a hill. You shift 12 times, each one wetter than the last, and wonder if you'll ever feel clean again. A soldier limps in from the dark, dragging a sword and muttering, "Next time." You want to tell him there's always a next time, but you're too tired. Here's your canonical event. In 1381, after the peasants' revolt in England, survivors of the Battle of North Walsham stumbled back to camps like yours, battered and haunted, scavenging what they could from the wreckage. The revolt was crushed, but it shook the crown. An odd detail: some rebels carried stolen church bells into battle, thinking the noise would scare the king's men, though it mostly just made them easier to spot. Historians still debate whether the revolt's failure was due to poor organization or the crown's ruthless response under Bishop Despenser. You stare at the stars, half hidden by smoke, and wonder what you did to deserve this life. First joke: "If I survive, I'm marrying Gerald," you mutter, patting your shield, and the guy cleaning his sword snorts, nearly cutting himself. Second joke: "Bet the commander's sleeping on silk," you say, glancing at the noble's tent, still pristine while you're one with the mud. Third joke: "At least the flies think I'm a hero," you whisper, swatting another one off your neck. Nobody laughs, but you feel a flicker of warmth, like you've cheated death for one more night. The camp's a grim community now, bound by shared trauma and questionable hygiene. A woman, a camp follower, patches a torn cloak nearby, humming like she's forgotten the world outside this muddy circle. The wounded groan, some scream, and one guy's still singing, now about ale instead of bread. You almost admire his commitment. Your commander strolls through, his armor still gleaming, pretending to care. You hate him a little more, but you're too sore to act on it. You're alive, bruised, filthy, possibly broken, but alive. That's enough for now. You close your eyes, hoping sleep will drown out the memories of blood and mud, but the snoring guy's not helping. Tomorrow, you'll march again, or clean up more bodies, or fight another skirmish. For now, you clutch your sword, less for protection and more because it's the only thing that feels real. The stars flicker, the fire crackles, and you whisper, "Never again," knowing it's a lie. You're a survivor, for better or worse, and this muddy, miserable camp is home for tonight, at least. You're slumped by a flickering fire, the camp's glow barely holding back the dark. Your body's a map of bruises. Your thigh throbs from the barber's hack job, and Gerald, your loyal, splintered shield, rests against a log, looking as battered as you feel. The air's thick, with the smell of damp wool, bad ale, and that cursed stew, which you're still regretting. Around you, men sit on logs or patches of dirt, their faces gaunt, their eyes hollow, but glinting with the stubborn spark of survival. Someone's roasting a chunk of meat that's probably horse, and nobody's asking questions. Laughter bubbles up, dry and desperate, as stories start to spin tales of the day's chaos, already growing taller than the truth. A man swears he took down 6 knights with a broken dagger, his hands waving like he's conducting an orchestra of lies. Another claims he dodged an arrow mid-air and threw it back, which gets a skeptical snort from the group. You lean in, sipping lukewarm ale that tastes like it's been through the latrine and back, and add your own version. "I didn't trip over that corpse," you say. "I was tactically repositioning." The men chuckle, and you skip the part where you hid in a shrub during the cavalry charge, turning it into a stealth maneuver. Nobody calls you out. Everyone's rewriting their own terror into something they can live with. It's not ego, it's survival. A way to drown out the screams, the wet squelches, and the faces you can't unsee. Here's your canonical event. In 1455, after the First Battle of St. Albans, During the Wars of the Roses, survivors gathered in camps, much like yours, spinning tales to make sense of the slaughter. The Yorkist victory was swift but bloody, and the stories told afterward shaped the war's legend. An odd detail? Some soldiers claimed they saw saints fighting alongside them, a hallucination born of exhaustion or ale. Nobody's sure. Historians still debate whether the battle's outcome was due to Yorkist cunning or Lancastrian disarray in the narrow streets. You toss a stick into the fire, watching it crackle. First joke, if I'd known surviving meant more stew, I'd have let the horse trample me, you say, and the guy with the dagger laughs, nearly spilling his ale. Second joke, bet the commander's writing a ballad about his cape, you mutter, nodding toward his pristine tent, and the group snickers, picturing that fluttering fabric as the real hero. Third joke, Gerald's the only one who didn't flinch, you say, patting your shield, and a man nearby toasts to it, like it's earned a seat at the fire. The stories grow wilder. A guy claims he wrestled a warhorse and won. Another swears he saw a night trip over his own ego. A woman stitching a cloak nearby hums softly, her tune cutting through the grim laughter like a thread of hope. A lute player, missing 2 strings, strums a melody that's more heart than skill, and for a moment, the camp feels almost human. You stare into the flames, the day's horrors blurring at the edges, the blood on your gauntlet, the pitchfork guy's blank eyes, the sound of a horse screaming. You tell yourself you'll laugh about this someday, maybe even believe it was heroic, because that's what survivors do. They turn mud into legend, stone by stone, story by story. The fire's glow softens, the flames dancing slower now, like they're ready to rest too. You pull your cloak tighter, its damp weight a familiar comfort, and let your eyes drift to the stars peeking through the smoke. The camp's quieter, the laughter fading into murmurs, the lute player's tune trailing off into the night. You're still here, bruised but breathing, surrounded by men who know your story's half-lies because theirs are too. It's enough, for now, to sit by this fire, to feel the warmth on your face, to know you've cheated death one more day. The world beyond the camp can wait tomorrow's battles, tomorrow's mud, tomorrow's fears. For tonight, you're alive, and the fire's glow is a gentle promise that you're not alone. Sleep comes softly, like a whisper, carrying you away from the chaos, into a dream where the mud is just a memory and the stars sing your name.